Good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to dive into an important and complex topic, navigating fraud litigation in the U.S. court system. This presentation will give you a clear overview of how both state and federal courts handle fraud cases, the critical roles experts play, and effective strategies for managing these kinds of cases. I'm excited to guide you through this process and share insights that can help you better understand and work within this challenging area of the law. Let's get started. The U.S. court system is divided into two main types, state courts and federal courts. State courts deal with cases related to state laws and disputes that happen within their specific state. Their structure is organized in levels, starting with trial courts where cases begin, moving up to appellate courts for reviewing decisions, and finally, the state Supreme Court at the top, which serves as the highest authority for state law matters. On the other hand, federal courts handle cases involving federal laws, constitutional issues, and conflicts between states or parties from different states. Like state courts, they also have a hierarchical setup, trial courts at the base level, appellate courts in the middle, and ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the country and has the final say on federal law. Understanding this structure helps us see how cases progress through the legal system depending on their nature. When we look at fraud cases, they can be heard in either state or federal courts, depending on the nature of the case. State courts typically deal with fraud that violates state laws. This includes things like insurance fraud, consumer fraud, and contract fraud. For example, false advertising claims or identity theft issues that fall under specific state statutes are handled here. On the other hand, federal courts take on cases that involve federal laws or larger-scale fraud, especially those that cross state lines. This includes securities fraud, mail and wire fraud, or bank fraud. Cases involving federal agencies, like the SEC, or those that impact multiple states, are generally managed by federal courts. Understanding this distinction helps us know where a fraud case is most likely to be prosecuted. In a civil fraud case, the process starts when the plaintiff files a complaint. This document lays out the specific allegations of fraud against the defendant. Once the complaint is filed, the next step is service of process, which officially notifies the defendant about the lawsuit. Then comes discovery, where both parties exchange evidence and information relevant to the case, followed by pretrial motions that address legal issues before the trial begins. At any point during this process, the parties can engage in settlement negotiations to try to resolve the dispute without going to trial. If those negotiations don't lead to an agreement, the case moves forward to trial, where each side presents its evidence and arguments in front of a judge or jury. Ultimately, the process concludes with either a court judgment or a settlement between the parties, bringing the case to an end. The criminal litigation process begins with the investigation phase, where law enforcement or regulatory agencies gather evidence to determine if a crime has occurred. If they find enough evidence, the process moves to arrest and charges, meaning the suspect is formally taken into custody and specific charges are filed against them. Next comes the arraignment and pretrial phase, where the accused is brought before the court to hear the charges and enter a plea. During this time, plea bargaining or pre-trial hearings may take place to potentially resolve the case without a trial. If the case moves forward, trial proceedings begin, and the prosecution must prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Finally, if the defendant is convicted, sentencing occurs, which can involve penalties such as fines, restitution payments, or imprisonment. Each of these steps plays a critical role in ensuring a fair and thorough criminal justice process. Expert witnesses hold a critical position in fraud trials by offering specialized knowledge that goes beyond the basic legal facts. In civil cases, they typically analyze financial records, valuations, or forensic accounting to help the court grasp complicated issues. When it comes to criminal cases, these experts often testify about investigative findings, the techniques used to uncover fraud, and the consequences of fraudulent activities. Their credibility and objective analysis are crucial, as they enable judges and juries to comprehend the technical details that can ultimately influence the outcome of a case. Essentially, expert witnesses bring valuable, in-depth expertise that is key to understanding the complexities of fraud.